love, friends, family, and the broader internet. On today's quarantine book video with Erica, we're going to be talking about fantasy lesbians. In about I think like November, December 2019, I read like 4 books in a row that featured 2 women in a relationship, aka the lesbians, who also were starring in fantasy books or sci-fi books that were very anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist in nature. And I do mean I read them like back to back to back. And today I wanted to get into some of those books because this is like a tiny subgenre that I love so much now. I had like a specific type of book that I really want to recommend some to people because, man, who knew if you just add some women loving women and a little dash of anti-capitalism, you'd make Erica's favorite books. But anyways, I've decided to orient this video in a fun way by connecting these anti-capitalist lesbians to people that you might see on leftist Twitter. Let's just dive right into them. So the book on top of my stack is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal and El-Mohtar and Gladstone. This is an adult sci-fi book. It follows 2 time-traveling spies named Blue and Red, and this book is told in between their perspectives as they send each other letters. Because it's like a futuristic time travel book, and it's also kind of set in societies that don't like entirely function physically like humans. It's told in like very interesting ways. So, like, sometimes they write letters and those letters are communicated via like telepathic means and like pills or juice or various things like that, or like even like I think at one point there's like a blade of grass letter. Anyways, it's a beautiful book where the 2 main characters slowly fall in love over letters as they are first as like rival spy soldiers, and then eventually finding that they have more in common and are actually in love than their broader organization would like them to be, and have to kind of rebel against those organizations in order to save one another, or, you know, sacrifice one another to the organization. As Twitter leftists, this is definitely like, you know, this is like Hillary Stan Twitter in 2016, who 4 years later is like extremely tired of watching moderates flop. These are like the Warren voters of leftist Twitter. The second book on my list is Girls of Paper and Fire. I hesitated to put this book on this list originally because it does not really make commentary on what we would come to see as like anti-capitalist stuff, but it is very anti-imperialist and has a big conversation about whether like war is something that can be can war ever be good type of discussion, which is really interesting. It is a book that takes place in a fantasy world where there are 3 castes of folks. So you have like in the moon cast, you have people who have like who take on demon and like animal looking appearances, and then you have the paper cast at the lowest level who are what we would consider like humans, and then you have the steel cast in the middle that are like a combination of those traits. So our main characters are a pair of paper, so human concubines for the emperor, who is a mooncast demon man, horrible man, and they are required to like service his needs kind of against their will, and they work together to find a way to take down the emperor, and in the meantime make friends with one another and fall in love, because it's really sweet. This book does cover it does detail some moments of like sexual assault and non-consensual sexual relationships, as well as like very thoughtful like scenes with consent in them. It's a really interesting book that gets into these themes about like what consent is and that sort of thing. I really recommend it if I don't know, if you're a person who just likes thinking about like sexuality and stuff, especially in contexts where like what you can feel and what sexuality is and what sex is so heavily dictated. That's really what to me feels like the big like resistance push in this book, is kind of defying like a strict expectation of like what a person's sexuality should be and what a person's relationship with like power and the human body and so on and so forth. That's all wrapped up in this book, and I think it's a really powerful one. This book has leftist Twitter folks who didn't realize that they were actually leftist Twitter folks 4 years ago, or even 3 or 2 years ago. They just like slowly got radicalized over the past couple of years. That's the main character, Lei. Her love interest, Ren, would definitely be like in the DSA, which is a Democratic Socialist of America, and like have all of this like far leftist stuff that she's like slowly exposing Lei to over the course of the book. That's definitely this book in terms of leftist Twitter. One of my favorite books of last year, I am probably going to talk about it in a whole bunch of other videos as well, is We Set the Dark on Fire by Tehlor Mejia. This book takes place in a Latin American inspired fantasy universe where most of the people live inside this like protected city type place, and then on the outside there are people who are just kind of been like left out for, I think it's like safety reasons, like a plague type thing. I can't quite remember, but the main character, Daniela, is a high-ranking, is like really high up in her school for rich kids who are going to marry into socialite positions and like be the next generation of like the elite. Except she has actually faked her paperwork to get into this school and to get this opportunity, and she is actually from a low class of people who live on the outskirts of town and who originally kind of like hopped the wall to get into the city. And her love interest, Carmen, is kind of the stereotypical like really also very good at the school and like prim and feminine and stuff, and they hate each other at the beginning, and then they end up assigned to marry the same man. This is a world in which each like elite man gets 2 wives. One is responsible for like maintaining the household and running like finances and stuff like that, and then the other is responsible for like the emotional aspects of what we understand as femininity, so like providing sexual gratification and raising children and stuff like that. So Daniela and Carmen are the 2 wives of this very high-ranking young member of society, and the 2 of them have to like navigate that new relationship in this like new household and the roles that they're trying to take on, while also learning more about one another and learning more about the underlying resistance elements that are already present in the city who can threaten Daniela and Carmen's place based on like the secrets that they are holding. Daniela and Carmen agreed to work for the Mike Bloomberg campaign and then secretly sabotaged it from the inside. And Carmen ended up like releasing a video at the end that was like, here are all my experiences sabotaging the Mike Bloomberg campaign. We're talking like took the money and then went door to door campaigning for Bernie Sanders. Incredible. I've also recommended this book up and down if you've heard me talk about books lately, is Crier's War. This takes place in a universe where the ruling class are a bunch of like android folks, including the main like princess figure, Crier. And then there are also like subjugated human class who are, you know, considered to be like hasty and irrational and not fit to rule, all that stuff. And the second main character, Isla, is an assassin from that group who is trying to kill Crier. The 2 of them meet while Isla is trying to kill Crier, and Crier is like spying on, I think, her father and her this other android man who she's kind of been like promised to as a fiance. And Crier, poor baby, sweet baby, is rescued by Isla and immediately is like, this girl, I'm fascinated by her. I would like to be around her more. I want her here all the time. She's wonderful and beautiful, and I need her right here all the time beside me. That's the insta-love in this book. Big insta-love, big dumb, extremely dumb android princess. I love her. Anyways, the reason I put this book on this list is because there is a lot of discussion about how to both like defy the social order that's been put into place in terms of like Crier's feelings for Isla growing and like Crier sacrificing a lot of things in order to help Isla and kind of vice versa. But then also there's a discussion towards the end about like valuable materials and like energy sources and kind of ethical ways to keep your society sustained and what it means to like consume natural resources. So I'm really interested in seeing where the second book in this I think it's a duology goes, because it's going to get, I think, more into that like resource spending aspect, which I'm really interested in, and yeah, would recommend. These Twitter leftists, Isla is like a Bernie Sanders stan, like has the word Bernie Sanders in her Twitter handle. Crier is like Joe Biden's like campaign manager's daughter, like quite close to home, has just been raised with this idea that like Joe Biden is the unity candidate, and then along comes this Bernie Sanders like aggressive online Bernie bro-esque Isla, and there you go. And then they duke it out and figure out, hey, maybe we should ban fracking. Fifth book on my list is Tarnished Are the Stars by Rosiee Thor. This is a book that takes place in, how to describe this? So it's like a terraformed moon, or a moon that they're trying to terraform in a like post-Earth space-based society. And so there's like a big city in which like this kind of like civilization is, and then there's a group of people on the outside who have been corrupted with a form of heart disease and have survived because they've started to incorporate artificial pieces into their bodies. So like the main character and her, I think grandfather are doctors, and the grandfather manufactures these kind of like artificial hearts to like help people who have heart disease actually survive. And then the other two main characters, one of them is the son of the mayor of the city, and the mayor of the city is very like anti like people on the outside, wants to keep the walls very secure, says that that's the only way to prevent like the heart disease issues. And so yeah, and he has this idiot son, like super idiot. We love idiots. And then the third main character is training to be a spy, and is promised to be engaged to the mayor's son, and so has to come from her society of like folks on a spaceship watching the terraforming experiments happen, so that she can, she one day wants to become queen. So these three main characters, the kind of like member of this outside civilization, the governor's son, and this assassin from the moon base place, end up meeting and having adventures where they try to figure out, like what is actually happening in the city and why all the separation, and who is actually in power and how can you disrupt those power structures. The main characters, the main characters' names are Annie, Eliza, and Nathaniel. Nathaniel is a beautiful Arrow Ace boy. I have been really looking for especially asexual representation in books, and this was a really fascinating one where they actually like talked about what asexuality is and like what sexuality, like what it can look like and how you can figure it out for yourself, and I really enjoyed that about this book. And then Annie and Eliza are the female protagonists who find themselves very attracted to one another. I put this book in this list for sure because it's like 3 different power structures, 3 different societies, and 3 different members of those societies who are trying to like understand the internal logic of those rules and find their own place in those societies, and also come to terms with bringing their society on top of the other two. So like, it's a really fascinating exploration of power dynamics, in my opinion, as well as a really interesting mesh of like space terraforming, dystopian feeling world, space opera type stuff, and like this kind of hearty it's about artificial hearts, that's why heart is funny, like discussion of science and medicine that we could apply. As leftist Twitter, I think Annie and Eliza are definitely, is that right? Anna, I'm sorry, it's Anna. I've been calling her Annie this whole time, it's actually Anna. Anna and Eliza are definitely like Team Sanders Warren. We're kind of torn up when Warren dropped out of the race. We're pretty upset when they kept having their like fallouts publicly. Anna definitely ditched Warren at the last minute is what I'm saying, like, and got really upset, snake emojis everywhere, yada yada yada. Nathaniel, sweet baby boy, just wants to help people and keeps being like, hey, who's the candidate that can help the most people, and gets confused by the results because everyone's candidate, according to their supporters, is the best candidate for this election. Anyways, the last book I'm going to talk about today is Once and Future by Amy Rose Capetta and Cori McCarthy. This is a retelling of King Arthur in a world that is in spice. Yeah, so it's a space retelling of futuristic, space opera retelling of King Arthur, where the main character Ari is the reincarnation of King Arthur, and there's also the Merlin character's premise is really interesting because the Merlin character is aging backwards through all these reincarnations of King Arthur. So every time he meets a new King Arthur, he's younger than he was the previous incarnation. So in this incarnation, Merlin is like 16. So he's like, you know, he needs to get to a version of the timeline where King Arthur actually succeeds in defeating the big bad evil thing. And the big bad evil thing is literally like how they described it. Like, Merlin needs to set Arthur on a path of defeating the biggest evil to that Arthur's universe. And the biggest evil, they decide, is the capitalist overlord of the space system. Think like, if you've ever played Stardew Valley, you know how like Joja Mart is there, and you are faced with this option of like, you can either support Joja Mart and like destroy the community center and like put a Joja Mart there and bring like fresh goods to your people or whatever, or you can take the anti-capitalist route, which is to rebuild the community center and like drive Joja Mart out of town. That's like this book, except Joja Mart is the big bad, and King Arthur has to rally the troops and do all of this space heist fun stuff and defeat Joja Mart. I loved how blatant this book was. Like, we gotta find a big evil. It's definitely our capitalist overlords. So anyways, if that's your vibe, I highly recommend this book. It also has a really great spectrum of LGBTQ characters. The main love interest for our King Arthur representative is this tiny blonde girl named Gwen, who is just like all hosts of fun and sassy, and I adore the main relationship between Gwen and Ari. I think it's a really it was a really fleshed out relationship for me. Actually, all the relationships in this book all the characters were very fleshed out. I highly recommend this. As leftist Twitter, these are like the TikTok teens who are going up there and like destroying Bezos and Bill Gates in just a few seconds. These are the folks who are like, bruh, why does Jeff Bezos have so much money while I can't afford to eat? If you want a book full of TikTok teens, it's a good book. That is the end of my 6 books about fantasy lesbians who are taking down their capitalist, imperialist, patriarchal regimes. I hope that you picked up some recommendations of books that you might like in the future. I'm having fun. If you're having fun, please let me know. That, I think, is everything I have to say today. So I'm gonna get back to my coffee and my quarantine read of Les Mis, and I hope you have a lovely, safe day.